from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up today on Ag Day, the trade dispute between the U.S. and China heats up, with China firing back.
I don't think that we can call it a trade war yet.
Even if it's not a full-blown trade war, the action's sending a shockwave through agriculture, with farmers and ranchers on edge.
But I've had the personal conversations with the president, and he's convinced not to let agriculture bear the brunt of any kind of retaliatory measures.
In agribusiness, soybeans are caught in the crossfire.
So soybeans are in the range of 12 times more important to U.S. farmers in sales to China.
And the Ag Secretary wants USDA to revisit their roots, and that's not hard to do at this Michigan greenhouse.
Ag Day, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Tyne Morgan in for Clinton Griffiths. Well, the trade friction between the U.S. and China escalating quickly this week, with China firing back at the U.S. with a new round of proposed tariffs totaling $50 billion. This time it takes aim at 106 products, and soybeans took a direct hit. But other major agricultural commodities like wheat and beef also faced a possible 25% duty hike. The $50 billion price tag matches President Trump's latest list of retaliation against China that was announced earlier this week. It includes $50 billion worth of Chinese imports he aims to crack down on, including robotics, information technology, and more. The escalating trade dispute is testing the nerves of farmers and ranchers, but Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue standing by the president's fair trade mantra.
I think there's cause for anxiety. Obviously, our administration is going to continue to try to negotiate with China to relieve us of their unfair trade practices. But I've had the personal conversations with the president, and he's convinced not to let agriculture bear the brunt of any kind of retaliatory measures.
Perdue trying to hammer on the president's underlying point of this trade scuffle, and that's to relieve the pressure of what he calls unfair trade practices. And it's that negotiation that some analysts are hopeful will happen before the newest list of proposed tariffs are put into place. That's as there are several details missing from China's most recent round of tariffs, including a timeline. Economist Matt Roberts says the new tariffs won't kick in immediately.
Those sets of tariffs that the United States has imposed on electronics, this $50 billion, those can't go into effect before mid-May at the earliest, at least 6 weeks out. The tariffs that were just announced that included soybeans also do not appear to go into effect. They are delayed. It is not clear when they do go into effect, but it's reasonable to think they will go into effect at about that same time frame. In other words, this is a mutual assured destruction kind of move.
Now, trying to tame fears on Wall Street, the president's brand new National Economic Council director, Larry Kudlow, said during an interview on Fox Business that U.S. proposed tariffs on Chinese imports might not even go into effect. And it's that kind of rhetoric easing some fears of a possible trade war.
I don't think that we can call it a trade war yet because of all the tariffs that are on the table, the big ones, the 301 tariffs. They're still in the proposal phase, guys. Now, what this does with the proposals from the Trump administration, the countermeasures from China, this gives us the best opportunity in a long time to get both sides to the table and get China in compliance with the WTO rules and regulations as regarding the intellectual property. We're not in a trade war. We're as close as we've been in a long time, but we're not in a trade war.
But the fear of retaliation shook the commodity markets on Wednesday, with grains and oilseeds bleeding red across the board. That's because the amount of ag goods at stake with the latest round of retaliation is high. Now, China is targeting 106 U.S. products in total, including soybeans, corn, cotton, wheat, beef, and beef products. Also cranberries, orange juice, and tobacco. Now, to put this in perspective, China was the #1 destination for U.S. ag exports last year, totaling $21.4 billion. And that number grew more than 200% in just a decade. China is the top destination for U.S. soybeans. Well, soybeans has the most at stake. Following China's announcement of the proposed 25% tariff on U.S. soybeans, the American Soybean Association shared its frustration over the escalation of the trade dispute with the largest customer of U.S. soy. ASA President John Heisdorfer says there is no longer a hypothetical, and a 25% tariff will have a devastating effect on every soybean farmer in America. Betsy Jimin continues our coverage on the tariffs.
Tyne, among this uncertainty, the questions remain. Can China fulfill its soybean needs from South America? And could U.S. soybean exports still hold without China?
They're poised to buy 100 million metric tons this next marketing year. If they go with that number, the only way, in my opinion, that they can get that number out of South America would be to have South America import beans from the U.S.
Payne says the U.S. will feel a pinch if we lose China, the largest buyer of U.S. soy. However, Brazilian soybean prices are spiking on the news, which could incentivize other countries to buy from the U.S.
There isn't enough business out there. Europe, Mexico combined wouldn't even be a fraction of what China has to offer.
If we see some sort of a solution where both sides come together and they at least back off on the current set of tariffs, and we go back to a situation where there's still trade tension, but at least we've backed away from the current setting, I think it's very quick. A day or two, we recover this 30 to 50 cent losses.
Now, China did buy soybeans yesterday morning as the futures dropped. U.S. reported a private sale of 129,000 metric tons Wednesday morning. There was also a sale of 325,000 metric tons of an unknown destination. Farm Journal economist Chip Flory says that destination was more than likely China.
Well, winter hasn't quite given up. Mike Hoffman has details and crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Tyne. We heard from the University of Arkansas Extension. They said fruit growers in northwestern Arkansas are scouting for damage after freezing temperatures hit Wednesday morning. Many of the fruit crops, like strawberries and peaches, are in a vulnerable flowering stage right now. Temperatures in Fayetteville dipped to 27 degrees. Despite the overnight cold, things are certainly greening up nicely, though. We received this photo from a fan of the show. It was snapped just east of there in Marble, Kansas. He said cattle are enjoying a sunny day and trees are about to bud out. And taking a look at the wind speed forecast for today, we are looking at very windy conditions to start today in New England. As we look at things the rest of the day, then it becomes windy in parts of the northern plains states into Illinois. And then you can see as we head toward today tomorrow, basically northern plains through the Great Lakes, the windiest area to start today. That spreads into the central plains, parts of the southwest by later on. We'll have your forecast coming up, but first here are some hometown temps.
Save time each day and receive the latest market prices directly to your cell phone with market updates. It makes it effortless to stay aware of shifting market prices. Just text Markets 8 to 31313 to get started.
Our in-depth coverage of the trade dispute with China continues in 2 minutes as we take a closer look at soybean prices and just how bad it could get. In our Drovers Report, we look at the impact the tariff spat could have to the U.S. beef sector. And Sunny Perdue goes back to our roots, literally, as we head in the country to Michigan.
With a uniquely powerful formulation of proven ingredients, Resicor corn herbicide gives you extraordinary power.
Who wants dessert?
At least when it comes to weeds.
In agribusiness, the market's having a knee-jerk reaction to China's latest tariff threats. Let's get details from the floor of the CME.
I'm Virginia McGaffey on the floor of the CME Group reporting on the grain market today. Soybeans really had a free fall. It seemed that the China tariffs tipped the meter and the market opened and it went well below 40 cents. This is the biggest move we've had in a long time. The market's been wild all day long. Once it bottomed out, we did find some buying and so kind of pushed it back up a little bit. But it's interesting to note that even though Argentina is still having trouble down there, it seems that the bumper crop that's being produced in Brazil could possibly mitigate any troubles that are in Argentina. And if the tariffs actually do come to pass with China, that's going to leave us saddled with an awful lot of stocks right now. And so that's got everyone very nervous. And it actually overflowed into corn as well. Cattle gapped down. It seems that the beef joined pork on the Chinese tariffs list. And that really sent the market tumbling. And it seemed that the final jolt came today when the beef was going to be on the list. That's all from the floor at the CME Group here in Chicago. I'm Virginia McGaffey.
Here now with Chris Hurt of Perdue University. Chris, you've been able to quantify and put a number on what this China retaliation on pork is going to be. You've been able to do that. But there's still this fear, is China going to retaliate against soybean exports? And are they going to put a tariff on soybean exports coming into China from the U.S.? If that happens, how devastating would it be?
Well, let's first get a little perspective of how important pork is in terms of dollars of sales to China. That's $1.1 billion in 2017. Okay. Now, $1 billion is big money, but soybeans are $12.4 billion of sales. So soybeans are in the range of 12 times more important to U.S. farmers in sales to China. So obviously, the crown jewel of agricultural exports is soybeans, and it is soybeans headed to China, the very big marketplace. So as we look at that, that says that the impact on pork, we think probably will reduce prices maybe $3 to $6 a head on pork, but that's only 2% of our production in the United States. We're looking at more like probably 30 to 40% of our production going to China on soybeans. So that impact certainly could be large. It will depend on the details.
So, I mean, if you do see China slap a tariff on U.S. soybeans, possibly what type of soybean prices could we see?
Well, I think we could be talking dollars lower in terms of prices. And again, we've traded around 10 to 10.50 in terms of futures prices. Probably talking about $8 futures is not a ridiculous statement. China will still need beans from the United States. They just can't substitute beans from the other countries. They need U.S. beans.
Yeah, real quick, because they do need U.S. beans, how likely is it that we will see them retaliate?
I think they'll be hesitant to put much of a tariff on soybeans. They need them. We supply 30% of all their use of beans. They need us. They can't replace that in Brazil and Argentina in the short run. But we would become a residual supplier. They would come to us last. And Brazil and Argentina, they would go there first. We don't want that in U.S. agriculture.
Definitely not. All right, Chris, thank you so much. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have a check of weather here on Ag Day.
Your vote could help a community organization win $10,000 and send a farmer on a dream sports trip. Vote now and help make dreams come true at powertodomore.com. Sponsored by Resicor Corn Herbicide.
Welcome back. Time now to check weather. Well, Mike, our whole show basically has been about China. We have more in the show about China. So please tell me you have something good in the weather.
Let me think.
No?
Well, the Midwest is still cold for this time of the year.
Come on, Mike. I was depending on you today.
I know. We're having trouble warming up east of the Rockies in most locations, and it's still pretty chilly. Big dome of high pressure over the Tennessee Valley this morning. It's a cold front to the south of there moving through central Florida with a few showers, but that will bring you folks some chillier weather as well. Some lingering snow in the eastern Great Lakes and the northeast. And the next system diving toward the Great Lakes across the northern plains. Another one coming in out west. So still a very active weather pattern. You can see that snow by later today across Wisconsin, Minnesota, some places that have seen lots of snow over the last 2 weeks. And we're looking at a fair amount of rain all the way down into northern California, much of Washington and Oregon, and of course mountain snow in the northern Rockies as well. As we head toward tomorrow morning, that first snow moving across the Great Lakes into parts of Pennsylvania and New York by tomorrow morning. High pressure continuing to settle off the southeast coast, and that storm that came into the west coast going to spread a pretty heavy snow across the north central plain states, eventually into the Ohio River Valley again. Unbelievable. And the next system coming in out west, kind of from the southwest. It hadn't happened in a while, but even Southern California may get a little bit of rain out of this by later in the day tomorrow. By late in the day tomorrow, we're looking at a fair amount of rain across Arkansas and some of the surrounding states with a band of snow across Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, into Ohio. Taking a look at precipitation estimates over the past 24 hours. Most of it's been in the northeast and a little bit in the southeast, adding in the next 36. So we have multiple systems that we just talked about. All of them are going to cause some moisture to develop. Nothing real heavy except for places in central and northern California and along the coast of Washington and Oregon, with those two systems that are coming in over the next couple of days. Snowfall estimates past 24 hours, most of it the Great Lakes in the northeast and the northern Rockies, but we're going to add some in a couple of strips across the plain states, and as well as the Great Lakes, and eventually this strip here is going across parts of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and into the northeast again. as we head toward the weekend. Checking this afternoon temperatures, it is warming up, at least in parts of Oklahoma, most of Texas. Florida still pretty warm. Chilly weather for this time of the year, though, across most of the Corn Belt. You can see low temperatures tonight, single digits in the northern plains, 60s by the time you get to the Gulf Coast, and highs only in the low to mid-teens up along the Canadian border during the day tomorrow. Here's the jet stream. We continue to see that rotating area of low pressure, kind of keeping the cold air plunges coming southward. That kind of goes away, and our model is going into a transition phase as we head into later next week, so we'll have to watch that. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. We'll head to Clovis, New Mexico. First of all, mixture of clouds and sunshine today, high of 78 degrees. Mankato, Minnesota, partly sunny, still chilly, high of 36. And Chattanooga, Tennessee, a mix of sunshine and clouds, high of 66.
Still to come, all this talk about China, but how big of a bite could it take out of beef exports? That's our Drover's Report. And later, innovative technology to grow year-round tomatoes, garnering the attention of the Ag Secretary. In Drover's TV, beef products are also a target in China's list of potential tariffs. Drover's editor Greg Henderson says retailers and other meat buyers are on edge. Now, the news initially shot cattle prices into the negative territory Wednesday, but prices did rebound later in the day. However, economists say it's extremely difficult to anticipate what type of impact the retaliatory tariffs on beef could have.
Trade benefits, people. I mean, gains from trade is the basis for most economic progress. So we'll figure it out eventually and go back. The question really is how long does it last and how much collateral damage is there along the way.
Now, the news of potential tariffs comes during a time when China just reopened its doors to U.S. shipments in June. That's after a 13-year export drought due to BSE found in the United States back in 2003. U.S. Meat Export Federation President and CEO Dan Hallstrom saying, quote, over the past 9 months, interest in U.S. beef has steadily gained momentum in China, but if an additional tariff is imposed on U.S. beef, these constructive business relationships and opportunities for further growth will be at risk, end quote. Trade policy expert Ian Sheldon from The Ohio State says it takes years to regain trust.
And we learned that from the case of mad cow disease, which in the mid-2000s, 2008, led to Japan cutting its imports of beef. Australia stepped in, took a lot of market share away from us, and I think that's something that we would need to be concerned about.
Well, the initial fear of retaliation may have sent livestock prices in the red, but cattle prices did close in the green. However, that wasn't the case for grain and oil seeds, and that's why economist Matt Roberts says feed buyers should use this as an opportunity to lock in feed prices while the price is right.
If these do go into effect, prices could go down. I don't think they will. I don't think they will go into effect. So see this as a great opportunity to catch up on your feed purchases. We know your margins have been awful. Now you've got this nice little sale. We're seeing China using this to purchase. There's no reason you shouldn't do the same.
All right, when we come back, we visit a Michigan greenhouse where the innovative technology of growing tomatoes got the attention of Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue is halfway through his Back to Our Roots RV tour, and Tuesday's stop in Coldwater, Michigan couldn't get him any closer to roots. The Ag Secretary toured the Sunset Produce greenhouses. The Ontario-based Mastronardi family owns the facility in southern Michigan. Now open since 2012, the facility grows Sunset brand tomatoes, on the vine, and grape tomatoes. This greenhouse used advanced technology, including energy curtains and grow lights, to provide fresh flavor all year round, even when there's snow on the ground, which I can tell you happens a lot up there. Secretary Perdue taste tested some of the wares and was impressed.
What this family's done with the technology of greenhouses and the automation and the year-round growing may be the future of agriculture, certainly from a fruits and vegetables perspective. With tomatoes, such different varieties of tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers, and it's pretty fascinating what they've done with very little environmental impact.
Now, the Coldwater greenhouse ships 30 million pounds of tomatoes and 10 million pounds of peppers annually. All plants are grown hydroponically using rock wool instead of soil. That's pretty amazing. Wow. Well, that's all the time we have this morning. We're so glad you tuned in. For Betsy Gibbon and Mike Hoffman, I'm Tyne Morgan. Have a great day in Farm Country.